In this lesson, I'm going to look at functions. Now, we've already used one function in the user input HTML sample that we looked at in the last step. And you'll remember that this had a button, and when the button was clicked, it called the greet user function, which I'd written in JavaScript. Now, in the functions HTML page, I've written quite a number of functions. This is quite complicated relative to what we've looked at before in JavaScript because there's quite a lot of code here, but it's really all fairly simple, and I want to break it down to show how it works. So each function is a named subroutine. That is, it contains a bunch of code, and the code between the opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket is executed when that specific function is called. Now the whole thing starts off, as before, when a button is clicked, and it calls the run functions function. That is, it specifies the name of the run functions function to be executed on click, on a mouse click. In this case, it passes to the function username.value. Username here is the ID I've given to this text field, and its value is the text it contains. So by default, the value is just name ? But when somebody enters some new text, then that will be the value. Run functions then, after declaring a couple of variables, specifies another function to be called, showHelloUser. So what happens is that onClick calls run functions, and run functions starts executing, that is, the code starts running, and the first line of code after the variable declarations is a function call. So that means that now the execution of the program is passed to the named function, which is up here, showHelloUser. I've got a variable up here which is just going to store strings that are built up in the course of executing the various functions. So all this function does is it assigns HelloUser to the output variable. That function now finishes, so I go back down to the run functions function, which is the one that started off. That now goes to its next line of code, which is another function call. And this time it passes to it a name. I'm going to look at how pieces of data can be passed from one function to the next in another video. For now, just bear in mind that this function calls showHelloName, and it passes to it the string a name. So that's this function up here. This function looks very similar to the previous one, except of course this time it has this piece of data between the parentheses. The plus equal symbol means append the string on the right to the existing string on the left. Now the run functions function carries on executing, so it now assigns a string to its capitalized name variable, and it does this by first calling another function. So capitalize initials is the name of this function up here. In essence, what happens is it declares three variables. End_str slices the name variable sent to it, the argument a name, from character 1 to the end of the string, and it sets it in lowercase. Then I want to put the first letter in uppercase, so I get the letter at index 0, which is the first letter in the string, and I set it to uppercase. And finally, new name, the variable new name, is built up of the combination of the initial, which is the capitalized initial, and the lowercase end_str, that's the rest of the string. And finally, I come to the last line of the capitalized initials function, which says return new name. New name is the variable I've built up, the capitalized string, and it returns it to the calling code. This is something that the other two functions up here didn't do. The other two functions just ran some code but didn't return anything. Now, what does returning something mean? Well, remember I said that in the function down here, run functions, I have a variable capitalized name, and I assign to it a value. Where does that value come from? It's the value that was returned from the function that was called. So I called capitalize initials, I passed to that function a piece of data, that's the string that the user has entered in the text field, capitalized initials, goes through all its code and creates the new string, as I've explained, with the capital first letter, lowercase, rest of the string, and it returns that string. And it's that string which is received in the calling function down here and which is assigned to the variable, capitalized name. And finally, I've got a function here which deals not with strings, but with numerical values. So this again has a return. It takes two input values. I call them value 1 and value 2 here. And when I call multiply, I send some numerical data to match those values. And multiply again returns. And what it returns this time is the result of multiplying value 1 by value 2. And again down here, I assign some data to output. That's my string that I'm building up. It's the string that I want to display at the end of all this code being run. And then finally, I display the output using document getElementID, as I've explained earlier, which finds this element down here between the paragraph tags, which has the ID right here. And it sets its inner HTML, that's the text between the opening P and the closing P, to the output. And output is the variable, as I've explained, that I've been building up. So it has this text entry field, and its value is name, ? And then the paragraph tag has the text output appears here, and it's got a button here. So I'll just enter my name, Hugh, say hello. Now, run functions runs. It calls show hello user. That's a very simple function. It just displays hello user, and that's what we've got here in the first line. Then let's go back down here. It calls the next function, and it passes to it the text that was entered in this text field, and that function just says hello plus the text. So I've got the text I entered, which is my name, hello Hugh. Then it calls this capitalized initials function, which is the one that returned the processed version of the text entered. If you remember to capitalize the first letter, well, you can't see anything here because I've already capitalized the first letter, but we'll try that out in a moment. And finally, it calls multiply, which multiplies this value by that value. It returns the result of that calculation. I assign the result to this variable total, and finally total is appended to the string down here, so 100 plus 5, and sure enough it's 500. Let's have a look at this capitalized initials function. What happens if I put in my name in lowercase? Well, this function sets the first letter to uppercase and all the other letters to lowercase, so you can see that in the third line here, the name is corrected. It has its uppercase initial. What if I put all the letters in the incorrect case? Again, it corrects it. The function show hello name doesn't correct it and shows it exactly as entered. The function capitalize initials does correct it, and so sets the first letter to uppercase and all the other letters to lowercase. So this is an example of how I've been able to call one function which calls multiple other functions, some of which, as these two here, just run some text, the text they contain between curly brackets. Others, such as these two here, process some values that were sent to them and return those values, which I've then assigned to variables. Functions are very useful for creating big complex programs, and that's anything beyond a few lines of JavaScript needs to be broken up into functions. Not only are they clearer, but they can also be reused. I could call the same function many times to perform, for example, if I wanted to capitalize many different words, I would call the capitalize initials function many times instead of having to write all that same code over and over again in my programs. So in summary, the syntax for writing a function is function. That's the key word, the reserved word to start a function. Then you put the name of the function, that's the name that you will use when calling that function from other code, and you can have more or less whatever name you want, and then a pair of parentheses which may contain one or more arguments, and I'll explain arguments shortly in another video. Then a pair of curly braces, and the curly braces determine the start and the end of the function. If you want to return some value at the end of the function, then you do it by putting the value you wish to return following the return keyword.